The cold reaches you before the light does. It finds the skin at your wrists, the damp edge of your hair, the narrow place where your shoulder has slipped from beneath the hide. For a while, sleep had hidden it from you. Your body had curled around its own warmth, knees drawn up, hands tucked close, breath pressed into the dark. But now the fire is lower, not gone, not yet, but no longer speaking in bright tongues. It is only a red wound under a grey crust of ash, breathing softly in the hollow of the hearth. Around you, the shelter is still. Stone waits above your head. A winter wind moves somewhere beyond the mouth of the rock, dragging loose grit across frozen ground. You are not inside a house. There are no built walls, no glass, no wool blanket folded at your feet, no lamp beside you, no door you can close against the night. You are in Ice Age Europe, in a cold season many thousands of years before written words, before metal, before farming, before any comfort could be summoned by a switch. You are sleeping where a small Neanderthal group has stopped because the place is better than the open plain. Better does not mean warm. It means the wind is broken a little. It means the stone overhang keeps snow or rain from striking the fire directly. It means there is a wall at the back to hold some heat, a patch of ground used before, and the memory of fuel not too far away. Better means the night may be survived if enough small things continue to work. The first of those small things is the ember. It lies under ash like something being protected, because it is. A living flame is useful, but a kept coal is more precious than it looks. If it lasts until morning, the day begins with warmth already waiting. If it dies, everything becomes harder. Hands must search for dry material. Breath must be spent. Time must be spent. Energy must be spent. And in this world, energy is marrow, fat, muscle, stored in bodies that have already walked, hunted, carried, scraped, watched, and shivered. A Neanderthal body was not delicate. It was built strongly, with a deep chest, powerful limbs, and a shape that may have helped hold heat better than a long, narrow body would. But no body is a magic shelter. Thick muscle can make warmth, and a compact frame can slow its loss. But cold does not respect strength for very long. A sleeping body makes less heat than a moving one. A hungry body makes less heat than a fed one. A wet body loses warmth with frightening speed. So the night is not conquered by toughness. It is managed. Someone has placed the hearth where the rock and wind allow it. Someone has gathered whatever fuel the landscape gives. Someone has brought hides close enough to be useful and far enough from sparks not to be ruined. Someone has watched the smoke move, because smoke can protect, but also sting the eyes and roughen the throat. Someone has learned that warmth is not only heat, it is position, timing, dryness, food, closeness, ash, patience, and memory. If you listen carefully, the camp is not silent. A person shifts beside you, not fully waking, only turning the part of the body that has gone cold back toward the hearth. A child coughs once, then settles. A hide creaks as a shoulder pushes against it. Further back, another sleeper pulls knees closer to the belly. These are tiny repairs. The body is always repairing its bargain with the night. The fire gives only partial comfort. Too far away. Cold climbs through you from the ground. Too close. Sparks may bite the hide, and smoke may thicken. The old hearth does not warm evenly like a modern room. It makes islands. A warm hand, a hot cheek, a cold back, a knee that aches against hard earth, a foot that has slipped out from under cover. The night teaches the body to become a map of uneven temperatures, and beneath all of this is the question that matters most. How did people like this make it until dawn, again and again, through winters where shelter was temporary and warmth had to be rebuilt every day? The answer is not one invention. It is not simply fire, though fire is at the centre. It is not simply fur, though animal skins likely mattered. It is not simply a strong body, though the body mattered too. Neanderthal warmth was a system made from many fragile parts. The place chosen before dark, fuel collected before hands became numb, the hide scraped, dried, held close, the meal rich enough to feed the inner furnace of the body, the people sleeping near enough to share heat, but not so carelessly that smoke or cramped ground became its own danger. Before we move deeper into that frozen night, take a slow breath and settle in. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into ancient lives, you can like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Now, dim the lights. The shelter darkens again around the coal. There is no clean line between inside and outside here. The rock above gives cover, but the cold still enters from the mouth of the shelter, low and steady, as if poured along the ground. It moves around sleeping bodies. It touches the stone tools left near the hearth, the bones cracked earlier for marrow, the stiff edges of hides that still smell faintly of animal fat, smoke, and earth. Every object has its own temperature. Stone steals warmth. Ash hides it. Bone remembers the meal. Hide holds the body's heat for a little while, then asks for more. A modern person might imagine a cave as a simple answer to cold, but stone is not a blanket. A deep cave can be damp, still, and dark in ways that make the body uneasy. A shallow shelter can block wind, but lose heat into the open air. The safest place changes with weather, fuel, smoke, and memory. Neanderthals did not live in one cartoon version of a cave. They moved through real landscapes, using shelters when they helped and open places when they had to. What matters tonight is not whether the shelter is perfect. It is not. What matters is that it has been made workable. Near the hearth, the ground may hold traces of earlier fires, old ash, burned bone, stone tools dulled by use. The place has a history even without writing, not a story carved into a wall, but a pattern of bodies stopping, warming, eating, and leaving. Every return teaches something, where the smoke gathers, where the wind curls inward, where the ground stays driest, where the body can rest without giving too much heat to stone. This is the kind of knowledge that can live in hands, in where someone places a branch, in how ash is pulled over coals, in the way a sleeper turns without waking, in the way an older person notices the fire has sunk too low and nudges a piece of fuel inward before the cold grows teeth. That is why the warmth around you feels both ordinary and precious. It is not the simple glow of a campfire in a story. It is the gathered result of a day's decisions. Food turned into body heat, wood turned into ember, hide turned into cover, stone turned into shelter, group attention turned into one more morning. Cold does its quietest work when the body stops moving. During the day, a Neanderthal body can answer the weather with motion. A person can walk, climb, gather, carry, strike stone, break bone, drag branches, scrape a hide, or follow tracks over frozen ground. Muscles burn food into heat. Breath grows heavier. Blood moves through hands and feet. The body becomes a small furnace, imperfect but active, always spending itself to stay alive. But sleep changes the rules. When the body sinks into rest, it gives up some of its defense. The limbs loosen. The mind releases its watchfulness. Muscles no longer keep producing the same steady warmth. The skin cools first, then the fingers, then the toes, then the places pressed against the ground. If the stomach is empty, the cold feels deeper. If clothing or hide is damp, it becomes a thief. If the wind reaches the shelter floor, it finds every gap the sleeper cannot guard. This is why the night is more dangerous than it looks. The threat is not always dramatic. It does not need to arrive with a predator's step or a storm's howl. It can come through a shoulder resting too long against cold earth. It can come through breath that chills the skin around the mouth. It can come through a heel that has slipped out from under a pelt. It can come through the slow fading of a coal nobody wakes in time to feed. A Neanderthal group living through cold seasons had to understand this without measuring it in numbers. They did not need words like metabolism, insulation, or hypothermia to know that a sleeping person becomes vulnerable. The lesson would have been written in stiffness, shaking, clumsy fingers, poor hunting, illness, and in the worst cases, bodies that did not rise easily when morning came. Cold was not an idea, it was a teacher that used pain. The ground was one of its first tools. Modern beds lift the body away from the cold surface beneath it. Even a thin mattress does a quiet miracle. It slows the loss of heat into the floor. It gives the hips and shoulders something forgiving. It keeps the sleeper from becoming part of the Earth's temperature. In the rock shelter, there is no such separation unless the group makes one. A hide, a layer of plant material if available, an old bed of ash, a chosen patch of dry ground, even another body nearby. All help create a barrier between living warmth and the cold below. But every barrier is limited. A hide can hold warmth, but it can also stiffen. It can smell of smoke, animal fat, and scraped skin. It may not be large enough for everyone in the same way. Its edges may curl. Its damp parts may chill the very person it is meant to protect. If it was worked with tools and hands, softened, cleaned, perhaps smoked or dried, then it represents hours of labour before the night even begins. Warmth is already hidden inside yesterday's work. The body itself adds another layer. Neanderthals were powerfully built, and many researchers have connected their sturdy bodies and relatively shorter limbs with life in colder climates. A compact body can lose heat more slowly than a long, narrow one, just as a rounder ember keeps warmth longer than a thin splinter. Yet this advantage should not be mistaken for invincibility. A strong chest still needs air that is not too punishing. A muscular arm still grows numb when it lies outside the cover. A broad hand still loses skill when the fingers stiffen. Their warmth began in anatomy, but it could not end there. Food mattered because heat is not created from nothing. The body burns what it has eaten. Meat, marrow, and fat were not just meals. In cold weather, they were part of the night's fuel. A person who had eaten well could sleep with a deeper store of energy. A person who had gone hungry would feel the cold sooner and answer it less effectively. The difference might show in small movements, one sleeper staying still, another shivering, another waking too often, another pulling closer to the hearth until smoke made the eyes water. Fat, especially, has a quiet importance in cold landscapes. It carries dense energy. It helps the body keep working when the air asks too much. When bones were cracked for marrow, the sound was not only the sound of eating, it was the sound of tomorrow being protected, the sound of warmth being stored in flesh before the long dark returned. Still, even a fed body must keep its heat close. That is why posture matters. A curled body loses less heat than a body stretched open. Knees drawn in protect the belly. Hands tucked under arms borrow warmth from the trunk. Feet pulled close are easier to guard. The sleeping shape of a cold human is not random. It is an old answer, older than language, older than houses, older than any woven blanket. In the dark, the body folds itself around its warmest places. Near the hearth, a sleeper may turn one side toward the embers, then later turn the other, not because anyone planned it like a ritual, but because skin knows when it is being neglected. The face warms, the back cools, the hip aches, the foot complains. Sleep becomes a series of small bargains. No position is perfect for long. Comfort is not a state, it is a correction repeated through the night. The group changes the problem too. A lone person in such cold would lose more than company. They would lose shared warmth, shared attention, shared labour, and the chance that someone else might wake when the fire falls. Bodies near one another can protect space. They can reduce the wind's reach. They can make the shelter feel less empty, less exposed, less like a mouth open to the dark. But closeness has a cost. Elbows press. Breath mingles. Smoke drifts over everyone. A child may take warmth from an adult. An injured person may need the better place. A stronger person may sleep nearer the opening if danger or duty requires it. So even before tools and fire are considered, warmth is already social. It depends on who can move, who needs care, who has strength left, who wakes easily, who knows the shelter, who can bear smoke, who can sleep on harder ground, and who must be protected because the group's future depends on more than the strongest body. Neanderthals are often imagined as rugged individuals, but cold makes individual strength less complete. A winter night rewards cooperation, memory, and patience. Outside, the wind keeps moving over the land. It passes low grasses, frozen soil, animal paths, dark trees, if trees grow nearby, and open places where nothing blocks it at all. It does not care that a group has eaten, worked, or chosen a shelter. It simply enters where it can. The task of the camp is to give it fewer openings. Inside, the ember remains the small red centre of that task. The bodies around it are not merely resting, they are surviving in the lowered rhythm of sleep, each one holding warmth imperfectly, each one depending on a fragile circle of ash, hide, food, stone, and breath. And as the night deepens, the next question becomes unavoidable. If the body can only do so much, and the shelter can only block so much, how did the fire itself become more than light? How did one controlled flame turn a deadly frozen night into a space where human sleep was possible at all? The fire is awake before anyone else is. It does not sleep in the same way bodies sleep. It lowers itself, hides in ash, waits in the hollow where earlier hands placed it. But it is still working. Even when the flames have folded down into coals, the hearth changes the night around it. It gives a red colour to the underside of stone. It makes the nearest air move differently. It dries one edge of a hide while the far edge stays cold. It turns darkness from one solid thing into a circle with a centre. For a Neanderthal group in a freezing season, fire was not only a comfort, it was a fragile piece of technology, a social duty, and a kind of living possession. It had to be fed, placed, watched, sheltered, and sometimes carried in the memory of where good fuel could be found. A flame might seem simple to a modern eye, because we live in a world where fire can be made in a second. But in this older world, warmth begins long before the wood burns. It begins with knowing which branches are worth carrying, which dead wood is dry enough, which sheltered place will let smoke escape without letting wind devour the flame. The hearth near you is not a bonfire. A huge blaze would waste fuel and fill the shelter with smoke. It would throw sparks into hides and leave the group sweating on one side while freezing on the other. The useful fire is smaller, steadier, more carefully kept. It is built to survive the night, not to impress it. A few pieces of wood are placed so they will burn slowly. Ash is allowed to gather because ash can smother, but it can also protect. A coal buried under it may hold its life until morning, the way an animal curls into a hollow to keep from losing heat. This is the first replacement for the modern room, not a wall, not a furnace, but a controlled centre. Everyone's position begins to make sense around it. The youngest may be kept near enough to benefit from the heat. Someone stiff from age or injury may be given a better place, if the group can spare it. The strongest do not simply take comfort and forget the others, because a small band cannot afford careless loss. Warmth is not equal, but it is negotiated through need, habit, and survival. The fire's reach becomes a quiet map of the group. Near the coals, the ground is warmer, but not soft. Farther away, the air is cleaner, but colder. At the edge of the shelter, the smoke thins, but the wind tastes sharper. No place is perfect. Every sleeping body is placed inside a compromise. The fire solves one danger and creates others. It keeps the cold back, but asks for fuel. It gives light, but exposes the eyes to smoke. It dries damp things, but can scorch them. It keeps animals at a distance in some circumstances, perhaps, but it also announces human presence through smell, glow, and disturbed air. A person tending it must understand more than flame. They must understand patience. If a piece of fuel is pushed in too early, it burns fast and wastes its strength. If it is pushed in too late, the coal bed weakens. If the fire is opened too much, sparks may lift and vanish into the dark. If it is covered too heavily, the breath of it may fail. A hand uses a stick to move charred wood inward. Ash breaks and glows beneath. Smoke rises, curls against the rock, then searches for a way out. In that smoke is another truth of ancient warmth. It is never perfectly clean. The comfortable image of a prehistoric fire, golden and gentle, misses the sting in the throat. Smoke can make eyes water. It can settle into hair and hide. It can blacken stone. It can make a sleeping person turn away, even while wanting the heat. And yet smoke also shows that the fire is real, that fuel is being transformed, that dampness is being driven from air, skin, and material. The smell of smoke may have clung to Neanderthal life as strongly as the smell of cooking meat or wet earth. The rock shelter holds that smell. Old fires leave traces. Burned bone, darkened sediment, reddened patches, stone altered by heat. These are some of the quiet marks by which archaeologists try to understand ancient hearths. The evidence is never as complete as a night itself. It cannot show every sleeper, every cough, every hand reaching for a branch. But it can show that fire was used, that it was placed, that it sometimes returned to the same spaces, that Neanderthal life included more than wandering through cold without control. Control, though, is the important word. Fire is not the same as safety. It is a controlled danger used against a larger danger. A flame can eat the shelter if careless material lies too close. It can burn fingers. It can destroy the hide that took so long to prepare. It can go out when most needed. It can attract attention. It can fail under wet weather, poor fuel, or exhaustion. Every advantage carries a demand. To use fire well, the group must give it part of the night's attention. Perhaps someone wakes because the cold reaches their back. Perhaps they do not think of duty as a separate thing. They simply know, from a lifetime of nights, that the coal is too low. They shift slowly, careful not to disturb the others more than needed. One hand comes out from under the hide, then another. The air bites the fingers at once. A stick is found by touch. A piece of wood is drawn nearer. The sleeper leans toward the hearth, face lit briefly from below as ash opens and red returns. For a moment, the shelter brightens. Not enough to become day, not enough to erase the cold, just enough for shapes to return. A cheekbone, a shoulder, a tool edge, a cracked bone, a child's small hand near an adult's arm. Then the wood catches, and the flame lifts in a low, wavering tongue. Heat moves outward, not evenly, but gratefully. The person who woke holds their hands near it, then withdraws them before the skin hurts. Warmth is useful only within limits. The others may not wake fully, but their bodies notice. A sleeper turns toward the heat. Someone's breathing changes. The hide nearest the hearth loosens as trapped warmth gathers beneath it. The group has not escaped winter. It has only repaired one small failure before it became too large. This is how fire becomes a system rather than a spectacle. It is not one heroic blaze in the dark. It is many small acts repeated through many nights. Choosing a hearth place, saving coals, gathering fuel, managing smoke, drying material, cooking food, warming hands, protecting children, and learning when a fire should be bright and when it should be hidden in ash. The fire also changes time. Without it, darkness is almost total. Movement becomes dangerous. Work becomes difficult. Fear grows larger because the unseen world presses close. With fire, the night gains a small interior. Tools can be found. Meat can be cooked longer. Hides can be shifted. Faces can be recognized. A low flame allows the group to extend a little human order into hours that would otherwise belong entirely to cold and dark. But it also shortens the distance between comfort and labour. A modern heated room lets a person forget the machinery of warmth. A Neanderthal hearth never lets anyone forget. Its needs are visible. Its fuel shrinks. Its heat fades. Its smoke announces every mistake. It teaches that warmth is not a background condition. Warmth is a relationship with material things. Wood must be found before it is burned. Branches must be broken or carried. Damp fuel must be judged. Ash must be handled. The fire must be placed where wind will not scatter it, and smoke will not poison the shelter's usefulness. Even the choice of where to sleep depends on the fire's behaviour. Too near, and the skin grows tight from heat. Too far, and the cold returns to claim the toes. So the hearth is not merely in the camp. It organises the camp. Around it, the old system becomes visible. Stone at the back, opening at the front, bodies arranged by warmth and need, hides pulled close, tools within reach, fuel saved for the worst hours, food remembered not only as hunger answered, but as heat stored in the body. The shelter is still rough, still smoky, still open to weather, yet it has become something more than a hole in rock. It has become a temporary machine for surviving the night. And when the flame settles again, when the awakened hand retreats under the hide, and the shelter falls back into red-edged darkness, the fire leaves behind more than heat. It leaves a little confidence, not certainty, never that. Only the feeling that the night has been answered for now. Outside, the frozen air waits without anger or mercy. Inside, under ash, the coal continues its slow breathing, and close around it, the group sleeps inside a warmth made from attention. By the time the fire is settled again, the shelter has become a room, only because human hands have argued with it. Nothing here was made to serve people. The stone above was shaped by earth and weather long before anyone rested under it. The floor was not laid flat for sleeping. The opening was not carved to frame a safe view of the valley. The back wall was not built to hold heat kindly. Every useful thing about this place has to be noticed, chosen, and worked around. A rock shelter can save a life, but it does not offer comfort freely. The first material reality is stone. Stone keeps its own cold. It does not care how tired a body is. If a shoulder presses against it too long, the chill enters slowly, then stubbornly. If a back rests near the wall, the sleeper may feel protected from wind, yet still lose warmth into the surface behind them. Even the ceiling overhead, darkened by smoke from many fires, gives shelter without kindness. It holds off falling weather. It may reflect a little heat from the hearth, but it also gathers damp, soot, and the deep coolness of the earth. A modern wall is meant to separate inside from outside. This wall only interrupts the outside, so the group must make smaller boundaries. A hide pulled around the shoulders, a fire placed where heat can reach bodies that smoke can escape, a low windbreak of branches, stones, or whatever the landscape allows. A sleeping place chosen not for softness, but because it is less wet, less exposed, less likely to steal heat too quickly. The shelter becomes useful by layers, each one imperfect. Ash is one of those layers. To a modern eye, ash may look like waste, the grey ending of burned wood. Here, it has more than one life. It covers coals and helps them last. It marks the centre of warmth. It softens the edge between flame and ground. In some places, old hearths and repeated burning could leave deposits that change the floor itself. A person may not think of ash as bedding, but in a cold camp, even the memory of fire in the ground matters. Dry ash is different from bare stone. Warm ash is different from frozen soil. A hearth that has burned before is a place with stored knowledge. Around the hearth lie bones. Some are cracked because marrow was taken from them. Some may have been thrown aside after meat was eaten. Some are burned at the edges, altered by flame, darkened or whitened by heat. Bone is food, tool, fuel of the body, and evidence of effort. In cold weather, a bone split open for marrow is not a casual leftover. It is part of the same survival chain as the fire. The warmth in the sleeper's chest began earlier, when teeth, stone, and hand worked together to release fat from inside a hard shell. The smell of the shelter is therefore not simple. It is smoke, old animal hide, damp rock, cold earth, cooked meat, marrow, sweat, and ash. Nothing is clean in the modern sense, but clean is not the central question. Dry is more important. Warm is more important. Usable is more important. A hide that smells of smoke but keeps the wind from a child's back is valuable. A piece of wood that smokes badly but keeps a coal alive may still be worth tending. A cramped place near the wall may be uncomfortable, yet better than open ground under a winter sky. The objects around the fire carry the day inside them. A scraper of stone may still have the memory of hide work on its edge. A flake may have cut meat before dark. A heavier stone may have helped crack a bone. These things are not decorations scattered in a cave scene. They are the small answers to large problems. Without tools, a hide remains harder to use. Without a sharp edge, meat is harder to divide. Without a hammering stone, marrow stays locked away. Without fuel, the hearth becomes only a dark stain. Warmth is built through such objects, one after another. The hide is especially important, though it must be treated carefully in the telling. We should not imagine neat, tailored coats with seams exactly like later clothing, unless the evidence allows it. But animal skins almost certainly mattered in cold environments. A hide can be wrapped, laid down, held over the shoulders, shared, used to block wind, or placed between body and ground. It can hold body heat close for a while. It can make a hard shelter more livable. Yet it also has its own demands. It must be removed from the animal. It must be cleaned. It must be worked enough not to rot too quickly or stiffen into uselessness. It must be dried, protected, carried, repaired, and kept from sparks. A hide is warmth that came from hunting, cutting, scraping, and waiting. Imagine one lying near the hearth now, its edge curled slightly from heat, its outer surface rougher than the side turned towards skin. It may not cover everyone equally. Someone's foot may remain exposed. A child may be tucked under a better fold. An adult may sleep with one shoulder outside the warmest part, because the hide has to stretch across more than one body. The object gives comfort, but it also reveals scarcity. There is never quite enough perfect warmth. Wood reveals another limit. Not every cold landscape gives easy fuel. Some Ice Age environments were open, with scattered trees or shrubs depending on region and climate. A group could not assume endless dry branches waited beside every shelter. Fuel gathering cost time and strength. Carrying wood meant carrying weight that could not be used for something else. Damp wood smoked. Rotten wood burned poorly. Good dry wood mattered. The small pile near the hearth, if there is one, is not just a pile. It is stored night. Each branch has already been chosen against the cold. The fire consumes that choice slowly. A stick placed in the coals becomes light, warmth, smoke, and finally, ash. The group is watching material turn into survival. This is why waste matters. A careless flame does not only use wood, it uses the labour of finding it. It uses the calories spent carrying it. It uses daylight that might have gone to tracking animals, repairing tools, gathering plants, scouting routes, or resting tired bodies. The shelter, then, is full of exchanges. Stone gives cover but steals heat. Fire gives warmth but eats fuel. Smoke dries and protects but stings. Hide insulates but requires labour. Bone feeds the body but must be broken. Ash preserves the coal but can choke it. Every material helps and resists at the same time. A Neanderthal night depends on understanding these resistances. not in the way a modern engineer writes them down. More quietly than that, in habits passed through watching, in a hand that knows where to drag the ember, in an older person's memory of which shelter floods after thaw, in the choice to keep hides away from sparks, in the way a sleeper avoids the wet patch near the entrance, in the knowledge that a branch too green will fill the throat with smoke, in the simple fact that a stone tool left too far from the hearth may be hard to find in darkness. These are not grand inventions when seen one by one, but together they make an old architecture of survival. The shelter is not a home in the settled, permanent sense. Morning may take the group away again. Hunger may pull them toward herds, carcasses, water, flint, or safer ground. Weather may make this place useless. Smoke may become too heavy. Fuel may run short. But for this night, the materials have been arranged into a temporary promise. Not comfort exactly, but enough. Enough heat near the centre. Enough cover overhead. Enough hide around the skin. Enough food inside the body. Enough ash over the coal. Enough shared knowledge to keep the system from failing before dawn. As the fire lowers once more, the objects become harder to see. Stone withdraws into blackness. Bone loses its pale edge. The hide becomes only a weight against the body. But even unseen, each thing continues its work. The wall blocks part of the wind. The ash guards the ember. The pelt catches breath-warmed air. The cracked bone reminds the stomach that it has been fed. The tool lies ready for morning, when survival will begin again in daylight. And somewhere in the darkness, a person shifts closer to another body, because material things can do only so much. Warmth is made from stone, ash, hide, bone, and wood, but it is also made from the living nearness of the group. The warmth nearest the hearth is not distributed like kindness in a story. It falls unevenly. It touches one face before another. It warms the side of a child while an adult's back remains cold. It dries the hide closest to the coals while the far edge stays damp and heavy. It reaches the fingers held toward it, then leaves the toes beyond its circle to ache in the dark. Even inside a small group, even among people who depend on one another, comfort has a shape, and that shape is made by need. There may be no king in this shelter, no throne, no written rank, no formal order that can be named with certainty. But winter creates its own hierarchy. The very young need warmth because their bodies are smaller and lose it quickly. The old, if old age has stiffened joints or slowed movement, may need a better place because cold makes every weakness louder. Someone injured in a hunt, someone feverish, someone carrying the strain of pregnancy or care may be drawn closer to the heat. The strongest bodies may be able to tolerate a colder edge for longer, or may be the ones expected to rise when the fire needs attention. This is not softness, it is survival logic. A small Neanderthal group could not afford to think of warmth as only personal comfort. The warmth of one body might protect a future hunter, a child, a skilled maker of tools, a person who knows where animals cross a valley, or an older memory of shelters used in bitter weather. In a world without written maps, libraries, or stored instructions, knowledge lives inside people. Keeping people warm is also keeping knowledge alive. So the better place near the hearth is not merely a reward. It is a decision. The shelter floor may show no visible lines, but the bodies know them. Closest to the fire is heat with smoke. A little farther back is cleaner air with more cold. Near the wall is protection with the chill of stone. Near the opening is danger from wind, but also the first notice of sound outside. To sleep in each place is to accept a different bargain. No position belongs entirely to comfort. Every place asks something from the body. A child may sleep half under a hide, curved against an adult's side. The adult becomes a wall of warmth, a breathing shelter inside the larger shelter. The child's feet may be tucked where the hide folds double. The adult's own shoulder may be exposed because the cover cannot stretch perfectly. In that small arrangement, you can see an old truth. Warmth moves through care. It is given, borrowed, taken without words, and paid for later in stiffness. Nearby, another person may lie closer to the opening, not because they are less valued, but because someone must be nearer the cold edge of the camp. The opening is where wind enters. It is also where sound enters, the crack of ice, the shift of an animal, the change in weather, the movement of branches, the first pale sign of dawn. All of this belongs first to whoever sleeps nearest the outside. That place may be colder, but it is also watchful. The person there may not sleep as deeply. Their rest is broken by draughts and small noises. Their face may be turned inward toward the glow, while their back feels the shelter mouth behind them. They are part sleeper, part barrier. The group's warmth depends not only on who is covered, but on who absorbs the rougher edge. This is how inequality appears before wealth. Not inequality of coins or land or houses, but inequality of exposure. Who is closer to heat? Who rises to feed the coals? Who gives up part of a hide? Who sleeps near stone? Who carries fuel before dark? Who spends more energy so another can spend less? It is not a permanent class system in the way later societies will know, but it is still a pattern of difference. Cold makes every difference practical. The fire reveals those differences without announcing them. When a flame lifts, it shows. Knees tucked under hides, a hand resting across a child, a scarred arm pulled close to the chest, a face turned away from smoke, a body curled at the edge where warmth fades. Then the flame lowers and the scene disappears again. The hierarchy remains in darkness because it is built into bodies, needs, and space. Food adds another layer. Earlier, the group may have shared meat, marrow, fat, or whatever else the season allowed. We cannot know the exact meal in this shelter, and it would be false to pretend that every night ended with abundance. Some nights may have followed a successful hunt or scavenging opportunity. Others may have followed hunger, poor weather, failed tracking, or hard travel. But the principle remains. Warmth inside the body depends partly on what the body has received. A person who ate more energy-rich food has more to burn through the night. A person who ate less may wake colder, shiver sooner, and sleep badly. If food is scarce, the distribution of calories becomes another quiet hierarchy of heat. Who receives the fattier portion? Who gets marrow? Who eats first? Who is allowed to rest after eating? And who still must tend the fire or carry material? The answers may have varied by group, season, and circumstance. We should not invent a single rule, but cold makes the question unavoidable. Food is not separate from shelter. A meal is a kind of inner fire, and hunger is another opening through which winter enters. The same is true of labour. Warmth near midnight may have been created by someone else in the afternoon. Someone gathered fuel while wind cut across exposed ground. Someone dragged branches back. Someone knelt to work a hide while fingers stiffened. Someone broke bone, divided meat, watched smoke, cleared a place near the hearth, or carried a child who could not move quickly enough. By the time the group sleeps, the comfort visible near the fire is the last stage of many unseen efforts. This matters because the body that rests warmest is not always the body that worked least. The person who made warmth possible may be sleeping farther away from it. Or the person who worked hardest may be given a warmer place because exhaustion itself is a risk. In such a small band, comfort cannot be understood by a simple rule of power. It is a moving calculation, adjusted by weather, relationship, injury, age, hunger, and memory. The old replacement system for modern heating is therefore deeply human. It is not only hearth and hide, it is judgment. Judgment decides when a child is pulled closer. Judgment decides whether a coal is worth waking for. Judgment decides if a damp hide should be shifted nearer the heat, even though smoke will thicken. Judgment decides whether to burn precious fuel now or save it for the last cold hour before dawn. Judgment decides who can endure a harder place and who cannot. Such decisions may not have been gentle in every moment. Cold can make tempers short, hunger can shrink patience, smoke can irritate eyes and throat, a cramped shelter can turn every movement into disturbance. Someone shifting under a hide may pull warmth from someone else. Someone coughing may wake others. Someone too near the fire may force another farther back. Care and irritation can live close together when the night is hard. That contradiction makes the scene more human, not less. Neanderthals should not be imagined as either noble forest spirits or brutish shadows. They were people in a severe world, with bodies, habits, skills, likely bonds, and limits. Their warmth depended on cooperation, but cooperation does not mean effortless harmony. It means returning again and again to the shared problem, because no one survives winter alone for long. In the shelter, the ember glows under its ash. A hand reaches from beneath a hide and pulls the cover higher over a smaller body. Another sleeper turns, giving their colder side to the heat. Near the opening, someone shifts against the draft and settles again. These movements are not dramatic, but they are the real architecture of the night. The hierarchy of warmth is written in them, not in command, not in ceremony, not in words we can recover, but in the placement of bodies around a fading fire. The cold asks who will be protected, who will endure, who will wake, who will share, who will carry the discomfort that lets another sleep. And for one more hour, the group answers by staying close enough for warmth to pass from one life to another. By the middle of the night, warmth has become routine. Not a routine written down, not a routine spoken in full sentences, but one held in bodies that have done this before. The shelter survives because the same small actions return again and again. Someone shifts closer to the heat. Someone pulls a hide back over a shoulder. Someone stirs ash from the coal. Someone listens to the wind. Someone half wakes, decides the fire can wait, then wakes again when the cold says it cannot. This repetition is not dull to the people living inside it. It is the difference between a hard night and a failed one. The fire does not ask for attention once. It asks all night. It lowers itself by degrees. A branch collapses inward, leaving a brief shower of sparks. The coal bed brightens, then darkens. Ash thickens over the red places. Smoke changes direction when the wind outside shifts. A piece of wood that seemed dry enough begins to hiss softly, and the smell of damp fuel spreads through the shelter. These changes are small, but the people near them have learned to notice small changes. A modern sleeper can ignore heat because the room keeps working unseen. In this older shelter, heat has no hidden servant. The servant is the group. Before dark, routine began with gathering. Fuel had to be found while eyes could still read the ground. In some landscapes, that might mean dry branches from scattered trees. In others, shrubs, roots, or whatever woody material the cold country offered. The best fuel was not always nearest. Carrying it back meant effort before rest, and effort meant calories spent. But failing to gather enough meant the night would demand payment later, at the worst hour, when hands were stiff and the dark outside the shelter felt larger. So the evening's warmth was prepared before the evening fully arrived. A person might bring wood in several trips, dropping it where it would stay dry enough. Another might sort pieces by usefulness without thinking of sorting as a formal task. Thin material catches faster, thicker pieces last longer, damp pieces smoke, rotten pieces fail. The hearth needs a mixture, because fire is not one appetite. It needs quick food to wake, slow food to endure, and protective ash to carry life through its quiet periods. The group's routine is built around that appetite. At first, when the light fades, the fire may be fed more openly. There is cooking to finish, tools to find, hides to arrange, and the last work of the day to do, in a glow that still lets hands see. Meat may be warmed or cooked, bones may be cracked. A hide may be moved nearer the fire to dry its edge. Sparks may be watched carefully. The shelter is busiest before sleep, because the night must be set in order while people still have strength. Then the fire is lowered. This is not failure. It is strategy. A smaller fire saves fuel. A steady bed of coals may serve better than a greedy blaze. The shelter does not need daylight all night. It needs enough heat, enough ember, enough smoke to behave, enough glow for a waking hand to find what matters. The routine changes from work to maintenance. The camp becomes quieter, but it does not stop. Sleep arrives in layers. One person settles first, then another. A child resists the cold edge of a hide, then quiets. Someone's breathing deepens. Someone else remains awake a little longer, listening to the fire and the wind together. There may be no formal guard, or there may be a kind of watchfulness that moves naturally between sleepers. It is safer not to imagine a neat schedule unless evidence demands it, but it is also hard to imagine a freezing night in which nobody ever wakes. Cold itself becomes the alarm. It wakes the person whose foot has escaped the hide. It wakes the person nearest the opening when the wind turns. It wakes the one whose side has gone numb against the ground. It wakes the one who hears the fire sink too low. Each waking is brief if the system is working. A hand reaches. A body turns. A branch is nudged. Ash is broken. Heat returns just enough for sleep to resume. This is the ordinary labour hidden inside survival. The movements are economical because waste hurts. A sleeper does not leap up unless necessary. Rising fully means losing the small warmth trapped under the hide. It means exposing skin to air. It means waking others. It means spending energy that may be needed in the morning. So the body learns half measures. One arm emerges. One knee shifts. The torso leans only as far as it must. A stick is used because bare fingers near coals are foolish. A piece of fuel is moved. Then the hand disappears again. The shelter teaches such economy over many nights. Where is the fuel pile? Close enough to reach, but not so close that sparks take it. Where are the tools? Near enough that darkness does not swallow them. Where should wet things be placed? Near the heat, but not in the path of flames. Where does smoke gather when the wind comes from one direction? Where does the cold creep along the floor? Which patch of ground stays least damp? Which side of the hearth is too smoky for deep sleep? These questions become memory stored in place. If the group has used the shelter before, they may know its moods. A certain wall may sweat with damp during thaw. A hollow in the floor may collect cold air. A stone near the hearth may hold a little warmth after long burning. A place near the entrance may be bearable on still nights, and miserable when wind cuts across the opening. The shelter is not simply occupied, it is learned. Routine also lives in repair. A hide slips. It is pulled back. A child kicks free. Someone tucks the edge again. Smoke thickens. Fuel is shifted. A coal is too buried. Ash is opened. A flame grows too lively. Wood is moved away. A sleeper coughs. Bodies adjust. The group keeps correcting the night because no single correction lasts until dawn. This is why ancient warmth feels so different from modern warmth. Modern comfort tries to remove attention. Ancient comfort requires attention to remain alive. The Neanderthal night is made from 1,000 small acts that would barely appear in a heroic story. Carrying one more branch, keeping one coal, scraping one hide, choosing one dry patch, turning one child, saving one better piece of fuel for later. Nothing about these acts is dramatic, but together they create endurance. The repetition also makes the group calmer, not peaceful in the soft modern sense, because the cold remains real, and hunger, injury, smoke, and weather can still break the system. But routine gives the mind a path. When the fire lowers, there is something to do. When the wind enters, there is a place to shift. When the hide slips, there is a hand to move it. Fear becomes smaller when action is familiar. Outside the shelter, the world remains wide and indifferent. Stars may be hidden by cloud. Snow or frost may lie beyond the reach of the fire. Animals may move through darkness without concern for human sleep. The group cannot master that world. It can only make this small pocket of routine within it. Inside, the same motions return. The ember dims. Ash is touched. A branch is drawn in. A sleeper turns. Breath warms the hollow under a hide. A child settles against an adult's ribs. The fire accepts another piece of wood and gives back a low pulse of red. The routine continues, not because anyone celebrates it, but because bodies have learned that survival is often the art of doing the necessary thing before it becomes desperate. And in that quiet repetition, the frozen night loses some of its power. Not all of it, never all, but enough for sleep to come back, thin and broken, while the coal waits under ash for the next hand that knows what to do. The smallest movements carry the most knowledge. A hand does not simply reach from under a hide. It tests the air first, fingers flexing once in the cold, deciding whether the task is worth the loss of warmth. A shoulder does not simply turn. It turns toward the fire, then away from smoke, then settles in the narrow space where both discomforts are least severe. A sleeper does not simply curl. The knees draw in, the chin lowers, the hands disappear against the ribs, and the whole body becomes smaller, guarding the heat that remains. These are not random habits. They are old answers. In a cold Neanderthal shelter, much of survival may have happened below the level of speech. Not because language or communication were absent, but because the body learns repeated conditions deeply. A person who has spent many nights near embers knows the difference between warmth that can be trusted and warmth that is about to fade. A person who has slept near stone knows where the cold gathers first. A person who has worked hides knows which edge will fold softly and which stiff place will leave skin exposed. The hands remember. They remember the weight of a scraper, the angle that removes tissue from a hide without tearing it, the pressure needed when the material begins to dry. Preparing an animal skin for use is not a single clean gesture. It is hard, repetitive work. A fresh hide is heavy, wet, and full of what must be removed. It can rot, it can stiffen, it can become foul and useless if neglected. Turning it into something that can help block wind or hold warmth requires effort, tools, patience, and weather that does not always cooperate. So the hide around a sleeping body is not merely an object, it is stored labour. Earlier, someone may have pulled it across a stone or held it taut while another worked its surface. A sharp flake or scraper would pass again and again, lifting, cleaning, thinning, softening. Fat, smoke, stretching, drying, and repeated handling may all have mattered, depending on what the group knew and what the material allowed. We should be careful not to imagine later tailoring too easily. The evidence for fitted clothing in Neanderthal life is debated and incomplete, but even without neat seams or shaped garments, skins could be wrapped, layered, carried, shared, and used as barriers against cold air. The micro-behaviour of pulling a hide closer is therefore connected to an entire chain of actions. A hand grips the edge, the sleeper tugs it under the hip so the wind cannot lift it. The body shifts to trap warmer air underneath. If the hide is shared, the movement must be gentle. Pull too much, and another person wakes colder. Pull too little, and one's own side remains exposed. Warmth becomes a negotiation carried out through pressure rather than words. The same is true of the fire. A waking person does not throw wood carelessly into the hearth. They touch ash with a stick, not fingers. They open a small place for air. They draw a branch inward so that its end meets the coal bed. They wait for the smoke to change. If flame rises too sharply, they pull back. If it fails to catch, they disturb the ash again. Each motion is small because fuel is limited and the shelter is close. The hand tending the hearth is performing a memory of previous nights. It knows that a coal buried too deeply may choke. It knows that a coal exposed too fully may spend itself. It knows that damp wood will smoke before it warms. It knows that a bright flame near a hide can become danger. The knowledge is not abstract. It lives in wrist, eye, smell, and timing. Smell may have been one of the camp's quiet instruments. Dry wood, damp wood, old ash, singed hair, cooking fat, wet hide, smoke pushed back by wind. Each smell tells the group something about the state of the night. Too much bitter smoke might mean the fuel is poor, or the draft has shifted. A sudden, sharp scent might warn that something near the fire is scorching. The smell of warmed fat from a hide or bone may mingle with the smell of bodies and earth. To modern comfort, this would feel harsh. To people who lived with it, it may have been information. Sound mattered too. A good coal bed has a certain low crackle when fresh fuel catches. Damp wood complains with small hisses. Wind at the shelter mouth changes tone when it grows stronger. A hide sliding over stone makes a dull scrape. A child's breathing may tell whether sleep is deep or troubled. Someone coughing in smoke may cause the nearest hand to shift fuel or pull a cover away from the worst draft. The camp listens even while half asleep. Then there is the behaviour of feet. Feet suffer early in cold because they are far from the body's warm centre and often difficult to protect. A sleeper may tuck them under a hide, press them against another body, or draw them close beneath bent knees. If one foot slips free, the cold may wake the whole person. The correction is immediate. Pull back, fold inward, search for warmth without fully rising. The movement is tiny, but it reveals the problem clearly. A frozen night attacks the edges of the body first. Hands and feet are also tools of mourning. If they become too cold, everything after dawn becomes harder. Stone tools are harder to grip. Fuel is harder to gather. Meat is harder to cut. A person cannot afford to let numbness become clumsiness if the next day demands travel, hunting, or repair. Night warmth protects tomorrow's work. This is one reason the group's small adjustments matter so much. They are not comfort for comfort's sake. They preserve function. A hand kept warm enough can strike, scrape, carry, and hold. Feet kept warm enough can walk out into the pale morning. A body that slept poorly but survived still has to rise into a world that gives no recovery day. The frozen night is not the end of the struggle. It is the bridge between one day of labour and the next. The objects near the hearth support these micro-behaviours. A stick for moving coals must be placed where it can be found. A sharp edge should not lie where a child's hand may press in sleep. A hide must be close enough to pull, but not so close to the fire that it sparks. Fuel should be arranged so a person can choose quickly by touch or dim glow. In the darkness, disorder costs warmth. Order does not need shelves or boxes. It can be as simple as always leaving the ember stick on one side, always placing fuel beyond the ash, always keeping the better hide under the smaller body, always knowing where the stone edge lies. Such patterns are easily missed by archaeology because they leave faint traces, if any. But human life depends on them. The face has its own small habits. A sleeper may turn the nose and mouth into the hollow of a hide to warm the next breath, then turn away when dampness builds. Breath itself becomes part of the shelter, warming a small pocket of air, then cooling against skin. If smoke drifts low, the face turns, eyes narrowing even in sleep. If the fire brightens, eyelids glow red for a moment. The face receives the night's changes before the mind fully returns. Even silence has behaviour inside it. Someone may wake and not move, listening first. The body stays still because movement wastes heat. The ears search the shelter. Breathing, fire, wind, the small scrape of something outside or only a branch settling in frost. After a few heartbeats, the body decides. No danger, no need to rise. The sleeper sinks again into the hide, carrying the decision back into darkness. This quiet decision-making is part of staying warm too. Panic spends heat. Unnecessary movement spends heat. A group that knows its shelter can remain calmer, and calm saves energy. The night is managed by restraint as much as action. The deeper you look, the less Neanderthal warmth seems like one discovery, and the more it seems like thousands of practiced gestures. The angle of a shoulder, the fold of a hide, the placement of a coal, the choice not to move, the choice to wake before the ember fails, the small sharing of body heat, the smell that tells someone the wood is too damp, the touch that finds ash instead of flame. These gestures are almost invisible from a distance. They do not become monuments. They do not leave stories carved in stone. Yet without them, the grander facts would not matter. A strong body still needs small habits. A fire still needs tending. A shelter still needs learning. A hide still needs hands. Near the hearth, someone pulls a loose edge under their side. Another person shifts a branch with the end of a stick, then watches until a dull red line opens along the wood. A foot disappears back beneath cover. A child settles again. The shelter returns to near silence, but not to emptiness. It is full of small knowledge, moving just enough to keep the cold from winning too quickly. The deeper secret of the night is that no single thing saves them, not the fire alone, not the rock above, not the hide pulled to the chin, not the thick body built by generations in difficult climates, not the meal eaten before sleep. Each one helps, and each one fails by itself. Fire dies, stone chills, hide slips, flesh tires, food runs out. The frozen night is too patient for one answer, so warmth becomes a chain. At one end of the chain is the landscape, with its animals, fuel, weather, stone, and paths. At the other end is the sleeping body, curled in the dark, trying to keep its inner heat from leaking away before dawn. Between those two ends are all the decisions that make survival possible: where to stop, what to carry, what to burn, what to eat, who sleeps where, which hide is saved, which coal is buried, which sound is ignored, which sound wakes the group. This is where the story changes. At first, it is easy to imagine Neanderthal warmth as a simple scene: a cave, a fire, a group of rough figures wrapped in fur. But that picture is too small. A fire in the wrong place fills the shelter with smoke. A shelter without fuel is only cold stone. A hide without food inside the body is not enough. A strong body without rest weakens. A group without memory repeats dangerous mistakes. Warmth is not an object they possess. Warmth is a system they keep repairing, and systems begin long before nightfall. The decision to stop in this shelter may have been made hours earlier, perhaps because the light was lowering, perhaps because the wind was changing, perhaps because the group knew the place from before. They may have recognized the shape of the overhang, the dry patch near the back, the safer approach, the place where fuel could be found, the way smoke would move when the wind came from a certain direction. The shelter was not merely discovered in darkness, it was chosen with memory. Memory itself is part of the insulation. A person who knows where the wind turns loses less heat than one who guesses. A person who remembers where dry wood may lie saves effort. A person who has seen a shelter flood, smoke badly, or grow too exposed after a shift in weather carries that knowledge into the next stop. The group's warmth is not only in bodies and tools, but in remembered mistakes. This is especially important for mobile people. A settled house can hold stored objects, repaired walls, familiar corners, and repeated routines in one fixed place. A mobile group carries more of its house inside memory and material. The shelter may change, but the habits travel. Fire knowledge travels. Hide work travels. The skill of reading wind travels. The ability to see a usable sleeping place before the night punishes the wrong choice travels inside the group. The old replacement for modern heating is therefore not just a hearth, it is a portable intelligence. It includes bodies adapted to hard conditions, but also choices that protect those bodies from being asked to do too much. It includes fire, but also fuel gathering, ember keeping, smoke management, and restraint. It includes hides, but also hunting, scraping, drying, sharing, carrying, and protecting them from damp and sparks. It includes food, but also the knowledge that marrow, fat, and meat are warmth before they are sleep. It includes shelter, but also the judgment to know when a cave mouth, rock overhang, hollow, or windbreak is useful, and when it is a trap. This is why the night is not won at midnight. It is won in pieces across the day. When someone notices cloud thickening over the hills. When someone chooses to carry fuel, even though the arms are tired. When someone saves a better piece of wood for later. When someone cracks bone thoroughly instead of leaving energy locked inside it. When someone dries a hide before dark because a wet covering will become an enemy. When someone keeps the fire modest rather than wasting it in a blaze. When someone leaves tools where they can be found by dim light. By the time the group sleeps, the night has already been answered many times. But the answers remain fragile. A gust can push smoke into the shelter. Snow or rain can dampen fuel. A person can be too exhausted to wake. A child can slip from cover. A coal can die under too much ash. A hungry body can shiver despite every effort. The system has strength, but it is not secure. It is a web of enoughs. Enough cover, enough fuel, enough food, enough dryness, enough wakefulness, enough shared warmth. This makes the Neanderthal night feel less primitive, not more. Primitive is the wrong word for a system that must be rebuilt from raw materials every day. A modern heated room hides complexity behind walls, pipes, wires, fuel networks, machines, and distant labour. A Neanderthal shelter exposes complexity. Every part of warmth is visible, touchable, vulnerable. The wood is there. The ash is there. The hide is there. The body's hunger is there. The wind is there. The cost of comfort cannot be forgotten because it lies beside the hearth. The fire, then, is not a symbol of simple progress. It is a relationship. It asks the group to understand air. It asks them to manage timing. It asks them to collect material before need becomes urgent. It asks them to accept smoke as the price of heat. It asks them to balance danger against danger. Burn too much and lose fuel. Burn too little and lose warmth. Cover the coal and save it. Cover it too much and kill it. Fire teaches by failure, and failure in deep cold is not a gentle lesson. The hide teaches too. It teaches that warmth can be made from another animal's body, but only through labour and respect for material. A skin taken from a hunt is not yet protection. It must be worked. Its weight must be carried. Its dampness must be managed. Its edges must be held close. It must be shared or assigned. It must survive sparks, rot, weather, and use. When a sleeping person pulls it tighter, they are using the result of many earlier acts that remain invisible in the dark. Food teaches the same pattern. A belly with fat and marrow inside it is better prepared for the cold than a belly with little to burn. But food comes from risk, tracking, hunting, scavenging, cutting, carrying, breaking, sharing. Each step costs energy before it gives energy back. The warmth of the sleeping body is tied to the animal that died, the stone that cut, the hands that divided, the teeth that chewed, and the metabolism that continues working under the hide while the mind is asleep. Even closeness is part of the system. One body near another changes the air between them. A child beside an adult loses less heat. A group near the hearth makes a warmer cluster than scattered sleepers. Yet closeness also means disturbance, shared smoke, limited space, and the constant adjustment of limbs and coverings. Warmth is not only produced by objects, it is produced by tolerance, the willingness to sleep near another breathing body, to share discomfort, to accept pressure because distance is colder. This midpoint of the night reveals something easy to miss. Neanderthals did not stay warm by escaping nature. They stayed warm by negotiating with it. They did not seal themselves away from weather. They reduced it. They interrupted it. They borrowed from animals, wood, stone, ash, fat, and one another. They made a small zone where the cold could not enter all at once. The wind still existed. The frost still waited. The ground still pulled heat downward. But for a few hours, the system slowed the loss enough for sleep to continue. That may sound modest, but modest victories are often what survival is made of. The body does not need perfect comfort through the night. It needs enough warmth to keep functioning. The fire does not need to roar, it needs to last. The hide does not need to be a tailored coat, it needs to trap air and block wind. The shelter does not need to become a house, it needs to reduce exposure. The group does not need complete safety, it needs enough order to meet morning alive. Enough is the true architecture here. Enough fuel to bridge the coldest hours. Enough ash to guard the coal. Enough memory to choose the better sleeping place. Enough calories to keep the inner furnace working. Enough care to pull a smaller body closer. Enough patience to tend smoke without wasting flame. Enough skill to turn a rock shelter, for one night, into a human space. Near the hearth, that system breathes quietly. The ember gives back a low red pulse. The hide holds a pocket of used breath and body heat. The stone wall blocks the worst of the wind, though it remains cold to the touch. The cracked bones lie empty, their marrow gone into living bodies. The tools wait for morning. The sleepers shift in small corrections, each movement part of the same pattern. There is no single hero in the shelter. There was no one invention that defeats the Ice Age. There was only a chain of fragile answers, linked together before dark and tested until dawn. And for now, the chain holds. The chain holds, but we should be honest about what we can see. A frozen night from 50,000 years ago does not come down to us whole. It leaves fragments, burned bone, stone tools, darkened sediment, hearth stains, animal remains, pollen, layers of occupation, cut marks, charcoal. Sometimes a shelter floor preserves enough for archaeologists to see where fire was used, where tools were worked, where animals were processed, or where people returned over long stretches of time. But it does not preserve every breath. It does not preserve every sleeping position. It does not tell us which person woke first when the ember dimmed. This matters because the story of Neanderthal warmth is partly a story of evidence, and partly a careful reconstruction. Careful does not mean empty. It means walking only as far as the traces allow, then marking the places where imagination must remain humble. We can say Neanderthals lived in cold environments across parts of Ice Age Europe and Western Asia. We can say they used fire at many sites, though how often and how easily they made it is still discussed. We can say animal hides likely mattered in cold conditions, but we should not dress every Neanderthal in neatly tailored fur clothing, as if we had found their winter coats hanging on a cave wall. We can say their bodies show features often linked to cold adaptation, but we should not pretend their bodies made them immune to cold. The night becomes more interesting when we do not pretend to know too much. Think of the hearth again. Archaeology may find its remains as a patch of heated sediment, charcoal, ash, burned bone, or stone altered by heat. From that, we may understand that fire was present, perhaps used repeatedly, perhaps organised in a certain place. But the hearth does not tell us whether the flame was bright at midnight or low at dawn. It does not show the hand that moved a branch. It does not reveal whether a child slept nearest the heat, or whether smoke forced everyone to shift. Those details must be suggested gently, as possibilities grounded in human need, rather than declared as facts. That is the first caution. Do not turn a reasonable scene into a false certainty. The second caution is variation. There was no single Neanderthal winter. There were many landscapes, many climates, many seasons, many groups, many thousands of years. A night in a limestone rock shelter in what is now France would not be identical to a night near the edge of a colder, open steppe, or a night further south, or a night during a milder phase between harsher cold periods. Some groups may have had better fuel, some may have had better access to shelter, some may have relied more heavily on caves or rock overhangs, while others used open-air camps when the conditions allowed. Neanderthal life was not one photograph. It was a long, changing human world. Glacial and interglacial rhythms altered landscapes. Animals shifted ranges. Forests expanded or retreated. Open grasslands spread or contracted. Rivers changed course. Fuel availability changed with vegetation. Cold itself was not constant. There were bitter periods and less bitter ones, local conditions and seasonal differences. To speak of deadly frozen nights is useful for the title, but the narration must remember that some nights were colder than others. And some Neanderthal groups lived in places where the challenge was not only freezing cold, but also damp, wind, scarcity, or sudden weather change. Damp cold deserves its own respect. A dry, cold night can be severe, but wet cold steals heat with a quiet cruelty. A hide that becomes damp loses some of its usefulness. Fuel that absorbs moisture smokes before it warms. Stone that sweats with moisture makes the shelter feel colder. A person coming in wet from snow, rain, river crossing, or thawing ground carries the cold inside the camp. In many real places, dampness may have mattered as much as the number on any imagined thermometer. But here again we must be cautious. We should not assign one weather condition to every night. Instead, we let the shelter hold a range of dangers: wind one night, damp the next, fuel scarcity another. The system that kept people warm had to be flexible because the cold did not repeat itself in exactly the same way. The third caution is clothing. It is tempting to imagine full fur outfits, stitched sleeves, boots, gloves, hoods, and snug sleeping wraps. Later humans certainly developed complex clothing traditions, and clothing can be vital in cold environments. For Neanderthals, the picture is less clear. They had stone tools capable of processing hides. They hunted animals whose skins could be useful. They lived through cold conditions where some form of covering would make sense, but the exact form of that covering remains uncertain. So the safest language is modest. Wrapped hides. Skins used as covers. Possible simple garments or draped protection. Worked animal hide. Windbreaks and bedding materials when available. We can describe the practical need without inventing a wardrobe. This restraint makes the script stronger because it forces us to focus on what warmth does rather than on costume. A hide over the shoulders does not need to be a tailored coat to matter. A skin beneath the body does not need stitching to slow heat loss into the ground. A pelt shared between bodies does not need a name to trap warmer air. The old system may have been rougher, more improvised, and more varied than the familiar picture of prehistoric fur clothing. That roughness is more believable, and in some ways more intimate. The fourth caution is shelter. Popular imagination often says cave people, as though Neanderthals lived deep inside caves like permanent underground houses. Real life was more complicated. Caves and rock shelters preserve evidence well, which means they can loom large in archaeology because stone shelters protect traces better than many open-air places do. But preservation is not the same as daily reality. Neanderthals also used open-air sites, moved across landscapes, and chose places according to need. A cave is not automatically warm. Deep spaces can be damp, dark, and difficult. Shallow shelters can be useful but exposed. Open camps can work under certain conditions but become dangerous in others. The point is not that Neanderthals always slept in caves. The point is that they chose and modified available places, using the landscape as part of their thermal system. That phrase, thermal system, sounds modern, but the reality was bodily and practical. Where does the wind go? Where can smoke escape? Where is the ground dry? Where can fuel be reached? Where will bodies lie? Where will the fire sit? Where will heat be wasted? These questions matter more than whether the shelter matches a modern cartoon. The fifth caution is fire making. Fire use is well associated with Neanderthal life, but scholars have debated how consistently Neanderthals could produce fire at will versus maintaining, transporting, or taking advantage of fire when available. The script does not need to solve that debate. It only needs to avoid certainty where uncertainty remains. A kept ember becomes more meaningful under that caution. If starting fire was not always easy, then preserving coals through the night would be even more valuable. The ember under ash becomes not just a poetic image, but a historically cautious one. It lets us show the importance of fire without claiming that every group could casually make a new flame whenever they wished. It also makes the night more tense in a truthful way. If the coal dies, the problem may not be solved by one quick spark. Morning could begin colder, slower, more costly. That does not mean disaster every time. It means the system has risk built into it. The final caution is Neanderthal humanity. Older stories often made Neanderthals seem dim, brutish, or half-human in the imagination, while newer, popular stories sometimes swing too far the other way and make them identical to modern people in every detail. A calmer view is better. They were a human lineage close to us, skilled, adaptive, socially capable, and physically powerful, but not simply us in different clothes. Their lives deserve neither insult nor fantasy. So when we describe them staying warm, we should not make them monsters of endurance or romantic guardians of ancient wisdom. We should make them people under pressure, people who knew cold in the body, people who had tools, habits, fire, food, shelter, knowledge, and one another. People who still faced limits. People whose lives can be approached through evidence but never fully recovered. The missing parts should remain visible, like dark spaces beyond the firelight. In the shelter, that caution changes how we look at everything. The hide becomes likely, but not over-designed. The hearth becomes real, but not magical. The group becomes cooperative, but not sentimental. The shelter becomes useful, but not a house. The body becomes adapted, but not invulnerable. The frozen night becomes dangerous, but not a theatrical death trap. The truth is quieter and stronger. Survival depended on enough things working together, under conditions that changed, in lives we can only partly see. The ember glows again through the ash. We can see its red edge. We can feel why it mattered. We can imagine the hand that protected it. But we do not claim to know the hand's name, its exact gesture, or the words spoken around it. That humility is part of the warmth too. It keeps the story honest. It lets the ancient night remain ancient, not flattened into a modern scene. And as the smoke thins against the shelter roof, the fragments we do have become more precious. A hearth stain, a worked edge, a cracked bone, a place chosen against the cold, and the reasonable belief that human beings, long before us, learned how to borrow one more hour of warmth from a difficult world. Warmth can make a shelter feel safer, but it also makes the shelter harder to bear. The fire that keeps the cold back sends smoke into the same air people must breathe. The hide that traps body heat can grow damp with breath and sweat. The closeness that protects a child can press an adult's ribs against hard ground. The stone wall that blocks the wind can chill the shoulder that rests against it. Nothing gives comfort cleanly. Every protection has an edge. That is the emotional centre of the night. Neanderthals were not simply fighting cold from the outside. They were living inside a set of trade-offs that never fully disappeared. Smoke is one of the clearest. When the fire is low and well-behaved, the smoke may lift toward the shelter roof, darkening stone that has already been darkened before. But wind changes everything. A draught can push smoke downward until it hangs at the height of faces. A damp branch can thicken it. A badly placed fuel piece can make it sting. Eyes water. Throats tighten. Someone coughs and turns away. But turning away may expose the colder side of the body. The choice is not between comfort and discomfort. It is between two discomforts, and the better one changes from moment to moment. A modern room usually hides this contradiction. Heat arrives without smoke. Light arrives without flame. Warmth fills space without requiring the sleeper to smell the fuel. In the rock shelter, the price of warmth is present in the lungs. It coats hair and hide. It makes the roof black. It becomes part of the body's scent. A person sleeping near the hearth receives heat and smoke together, as though the night refuses to separate gift from cost. The hides carry another contradiction. They may protect the body from wind, but they also make the body aware of itself. Under a hide, breath gathers. The skin warms, then dampens. A knee presses into the earth. A shoulder finds a stiff fold. If several bodies share a covering, every movement travels. One person pulls the edge and another feels the loss. One child turns and an adult wakes. Warmth becomes less private than modern comfort. It is shared, negotiated, disturbed. There is tenderness in this, but also irritation. A tired adult may want to sleep without being touched. A child may need the warmth anyway. Someone's cold foot may press against another body. Someone may shift too often. Someone may cough because the smoke has moved. Someone may wake at the moment another finally sleeps. The shelter holds care and annoyance together, because care in hard conditions is rarely soft all the way through. It is practical, interrupted, physical, sometimes wordless. This makes the group more believable. If we imagine perfect harmony, we lose the human truth. If we imagine only harshness, we lose it too. A small group surviving cold likely depended on cooperation. But cooperation is not the absence of friction. It is the repeated choice to keep solving the shared problem despite discomfort. It is the adult who tucks the hide back over a child after being woken. It is the person near the edge who bears the draft because someone else needs the warmer place. It is the hand that stirs the ember, even though it would rather remain under cover. The cold makes privacy expensive. In a modern bedroom, warmth can belong to one person. A blanket can cover one body. A door can close. A mattress can hold the sleeper alone. In the Neanderthal shelter, distance costs heat. To move away from the group may mean colder air, less shared warmth, and more exposure. The body may want space, but survival pulls bodies closer. The result is intimacy without romance, nearness without ease. A living cluster shaped by necessity. Even sleep itself becomes communal. One person's waking may protect the fire for all. One person's cough may warn that smoke has dropped. One person's movement may reveal that the wind has found a new path along the floor. The group does not sleep as separate sealed worlds. It sleeps like a collection of connected alarms, each body partly sensitive to the others. This connectedness is useful, but it also means rest is never perfectly private. The emotional contradiction deepens when you consider strength. A powerful body can endure more cold, but that may mean being asked to endure more. Strong legs can gather fuel. Strong arms can carry branches. A robust person can sleep nearer the draft, rise to adjust the fire, or give the better warm space to someone weaker. Strength brings advantage, but also obligation. In a small group, the body that can bear hardship may become the body that must. Weakness, meanwhile, is not simply failure. A child's need shapes the sleeping arrangement. An injured person's stiffness may draw them closer to the hearth. An elder's memory may matter enough to protect a body that can no longer move as easily. A person recovering from illness may take warmth that another gives up. The night measures value differently from a simple contest of strength. It asks what each life holds for the group: future, memory, skill, care, knowledge, relationship. So the warmth around the fire carries invisible decisions. Who is worth waking for? Everyone, perhaps. In a band small enough that loss changes the whole future. Who receives the better fold of hide? Whoever needs it tonight. Who rises when the ember fades? Whoever wakes, whoever can. whoever has done it before. These choices may not be formal or gentle every time, but they are social. The fire does not only heat bodies, it reveals bonds. Yet even bonds cannot erase discomfort. The person tending the fire loses warmth the moment they move. Their arm emerges into air that bites the skin. Their torso lifts, breaking the pocket of heat trapped beneath the hide. Their knees press into cold ground. They lean toward the hearth, face hot, back cold, eyes narrowed against smoke. They repair the group's warmth by damaging their own for a moment. Then they return under cover and wait for the body to recover what it gave away. This small sacrifice may happen many times across a winter, not as a grand heroic act, but as ordinary maintenance. That is what makes it powerful. Survival often depends on sacrifices too small to be remembered as sacrifices. Losing a little sleep, giving up the warmer side, carrying extra fuel, sharing a hide, tolerating smoke, staying close when distance would feel better. The frozen night is made survivable by uncelebrated discomfort. The shelter itself seems to breathe with these contradictions. At the back, the stone gives protection but steals heat. Near the mouth, the wind brings cleaner air but more cold. At the hearth, warmth rises with smoke. Beneath the hides, the body rests but dampness gathers. In the belly, food gives heat, but hunger waits for tomorrow. In the group, closeness protects but disturbs. Every place contains a bargain, and still, the bargains are better than the open dark. Outside the shelter, the cold has fewer complications because it offers fewer gifts. There is wind without cover, darkness without centre, ground without warmth, silence without shared breathing. The shelter's discomforts are the discomforts of a system working imperfectly. Smoke stings because the fire lives. Cramped limbs ache because bodies are close enough to share warmth. A damp hide is unpleasant because it has trapped heat before it trapped moisture. The hard ground hurts because the group has chosen a place solid and dry enough to last the night. This is not misery for its own sake. It is survival with texture. By now, the fire has lowered again. The smoke is thinner, but it still marks the air. Someone's eyes open briefly, reflecting a dull red glow. They do not fully wake. They only turn their face away from the smoke and deeper into the warm hollow beneath the hide. Another body shifts to make room. A knee touches a knee. A cold foot finds a warmer place and is tolerated. For a moment, the shelter holds. No one is perfectly comfortable. No one is fully safe. But the group has made a pocket of life inside conditions that would strip heat from a lone body without pause. Warmth here is not softness. It is compromise. It is smoke accepted, space surrendered, sleep broken, labour shared, and the body humbled by how much it needs other bodies. And in that humility, there is a quiet kind of dignity. Not the dignity of conquering winter, but of enduring it together. The system works until something presses harder than expected. A night can begin well arranged. The shelter can be chosen carefully. The fire can be placed where smoke usually rises. The hides can be pulled close. Food can sit warm in the belly. Fuel can lie in reach. Bodies can settle into positions learned by habit. For a while, everything holds. The cold is present, but contained. The group sleeps inside its small circle of repaired warmth. Then the wind changes. It does not need to become a storm. A small turn is enough. Air that had been passing across the shelter mouth now curls inward. Smoke that had been lifting toward the roof begins to flatten and drift low. The cleanest sleeping place becomes smoky. The warmest place becomes difficult to breathe in. Someone coughs once, then again. Eyes open. A person turns their face into the hide, but the smoke follows. The fire still gives heat, yet the very thing that gives heat now makes sleep harder. The system has not failed completely. It has become unstable. This is how danger often arrives in a cold camp. Not as one dramatic disaster, but as a problem that changes the value of every other thing. Add wind, and smoke behaves differently. Add damp, and fuel burns badly. Add hunger, and the body shivers sooner. Add exhaustion, and no one wakes quickly. Add a small injury, and the person who usually carries wood cannot carry enough. Add a child's fever, and the best warm place must be given differently. Each pressure pulls on the chain. The group must adjust before one weakness becomes many. If the smoke thickens, someone may open the fire, shift the fuel, or let it sink lower. But lowering the fire means less heat. If the fire is made brighter to overcome the cold, more smoke may gather, more fuel may vanish, and sparks may threaten the hides. If bodies move farther from the hearth to breathe better, the cold finds them. If they stay close, the throat burns. There is no perfect move, there is only the least damaging one. A person wakes more fully now. They lift from the warmth under the hide, and the cold strikes the damp skin at the neck. The body protests at once. Sleep had made a pocket of heat, and rising tears it open. One hand searches for the stick used to move coals. The fingers are clumsy for a moment, not frozen, but stiff enough to remind the person that even a small task costs more in deep cold. The stick touches the edge of the hearth. Ash breaks. A red glow opens. Smoke changes shape. The person waits. That waiting matters. If the smoke thins, the problem may pass. If it thickens, another piece of fuel may need to be moved away. A damp branch might be dragged to the side of the fire, left to dry rather than burn badly. A drier piece might be placed near the coal bed. The motions are slow because hurry wastes heat and invites mistakes. The person tending the hearth must read fire the way others read tracks outside, through small signs that vanish quickly. Behind them, the group shifts. A child is pulled closer to a cleaner pocket of air. Someone nearer the wall turns away from the smoke and presses a shoulder against stone, accepting cold for breath. Another person draws the hide over the lower face, not to hide from the world, but to warm and filter the next few breaths as best the material allows. Nobody speaks in long explanation. The shelter is full of practical movement, half seen in red light. Now imagine the pressure is not wind, but wet fuel. The group gathered wood before dark, but some of it was not as dry as it looked. Perhaps snow had melted into the outer layers. Perhaps a branch came from dead wood that held dampness inside. Perhaps the landscape simply offered poor fuel that day. When placed near the coals, it hisses. The fire struggles. Smoke thickens before heat grows. A person may try to dry pieces near the hearth, but space is limited, and heat used for drying fuel is heat not reaching bodies. Fuel becomes time made visible. Each stick is a coming hours. Burn too many now, and the coldest hour before dawn may arrive with little left. Save too much, and the present cold deepens. The decision is not abstract. It is felt in toes, hands, eyelids, and breath. The group is measuring the night with wood. If there is too little fuel, the emotional temperature of the shelter changes. Rest becomes lighter. Someone may listen more often. Someone may resist feeding the fire even when cold rises, trying to preserve the last good pieces. The ember becomes more precious. Ash is used more carefully. Bodies move closer because human warmth must replace some of what wood can no longer give. The group contracts around the hearth like a fist closing slowly. Hunger can press on the system just as hard. A good meal makes the night more survivable, but not every day gives a good meal. If hunting failed, if scavenged meat was poor, if the group moved too far, if cold weather made animals harder to reach, the body enters night with less to burn. The same shelter that felt barely adequate after a rich meal may feel cruel after hunger. A hide is thinner when the belly is empty. A fire seems weaker when the body cannot answer it from within. A hungry sleeper may shiver more. Shivering is the body's emergency work, muscles spending energy to make heat. It can help for a time, but it is costly. A person who shivers through the night wakes tired, sore, and less ready for morning labour. If several people are hungry, the whole group's next day becomes harder. Cold does not end at dawn, it collects debts. Injury adds another kind of strain. A twisted ankle, a bruised hip, a deep cut, a strained shoulder, an aching tooth, a fevered chest. Any weakness changes the distribution of warmth and work. Someone who cannot gather fuel must be compensated for by others. Someone who cannot sleep far from the fire may need the better place. Someone who coughs in smoke may force the hearth to be managed differently. A small band is resilient because people help one another, but it is vulnerable because every person matters. The shelter system depends on bodies that are themselves imperfect tools. Even age changes the night. The very young lose heat quickly and cannot solve their own problems. The old may know the landscape better than anyone, but their joints may stiffen, their sleep may break, their hands may ache in cold. The strongest may carry more, but they are not endless. Everyone's body has a limit, and the frozen night is skilled at finding it. Then there is the pressure from outside, the one the shelter cannot fully ignore. The darkness beyond the fire is not empty. Animals move. Ice cracks. Branches shift. Wind pushes loose material across the ground. Some sounds matter, many do not. The group cannot wake fully at every noise, or sleep will vanish. But it cannot ignore everything either. Fire may help deter some animals, and human presence changes the behavior of the space. But safety is never absolute. The person nearest the opening may carry the burden of uncertain listening. This listening spends warmth too. To wake, hold still, and listen is to pause between sleep and action. The body remains tense. The ears search. The mind decides whether the sound was wind, stone, animal, or another sleeper. If no danger follows, the body must soften again. But softness takes time. Sleep returns more slowly each time. By morning, the person who listened most may have given the group protection no one can see. Under all these pressures, the old system reveals its strength and weakness at once. Its strength is flexibility. Fire can be lowered or fed. Bodies can shift. Hides can be shared. Fuel can be saved. Ash can protect coals. People can wake, listen, move, and correct. The system is not a rigid machine. It is alive because people are alive inside it. Its weakness is that everything depends on attention, energy, and material that may run short. A modern heating system can fail too, but when it works without asking the sleeper to tend it through the night. The Neanderthal system never stops asking. It asks for judgment when people are tired. It asks for movement when bodies want stillness. It asks for cooperation when everyone is uncomfortable. It asks for patience when smoke irritates the throat. It asks for restraint when fear would make a person waste fuel. It asks for care when hunger makes care harder. That is why the frozen night deserves respect. Not because it was always a scene of panic, but because even ordinary survival required skill under pressure. The group had to hold many things in balance: heat and smoke, fuel and time, hunger and sleep, care and irritation, stillness and readiness, shelter and exposure. The smallest failure did not always mean disaster, but every failure had a cost: more cold, less sleep, more smoke, more fatigue, a harder morning. Near the hearth, the person who woke finally settles back down. The smoke has lifted enough. The coal bed is not strong, but it is alive. One damp piece of fuel has been pulled aside. A drier end glows red. The hide is cold where the body left it, and the first moment under it is unpleasant. Then breath warms the hollow again. The person curls slowly, feeling the lost heat return by degrees. Around them, the group resettles into broken sleep. The system has been tested and has not broken. Not tonight. Not yet. Outside, the cold continues its patient pressure. Inside, the answer remains fragile, human, and awake beneath the ash. Adaptation is easiest to misunderstand when it looks like strength. A broad chest, powerful limbs, a compact frame, heavy muscle, strong hands, and a body used to difficult climates can make Neanderthals seem almost made of winter. But no human body, ancient or modern, is made of winter. A body can be better suited to hold heat, better able to produce it, better able to move through cold air with less loss than another kind of body. Yet the cold still enters wherever it can. It still takes from fingers, toes, skin, breath, sleep, and hunger. So adaptation is not a shield, it is an advantage that must be supported. The Neanderthal body may have helped in several quiet ways. A stockier shape can reduce the surface through which heat escapes compared with a longer, narrower body. Strong muscles can make heat through movement. A deep torso can hold the organs close, protected at the warm centre. Broad hands and powerful arms can do the hard work of survival, carrying fuel, dragging material, breaking bone, working hide, moving through rough ground, and lifting the body out of sleep when the fire demands attention. But every advantage costs energy. Muscle must be fed. A strong body needs calories to remain strong. In deep cold, food is not only the answer to hunger, it is the answer to temperature. The body burns what the landscape gives it, and the landscape is not generous on command. A group may need to travel farther to find animals. Snow, frost, darkness, and wind can make tracking harder. Prey may move, thin out, or become dangerous to approach. Scavenged remains may already be poor. A successful day can warm the coming night, but an unsuccessful day can make even a good shelter feel insufficient. That is why the hunt, the meal, and the sleeping body belong to the same story. When marrow is cracked from bone, the benefit does not end at the mouth. Fat and energy move inward, becoming heat later, when the body is curled under hide and the fire has lowered. When meat is cooked, it may become easier and safer to eat in some ways, depending on condition and context. When a person eats enough, sleep has a stronger foundation. When they do not, the cold has more room to work. The body adapts by burning, but burning requires fuel. Movement is another form of warmth, and Neanderthal life was full of movement. Walking across uneven ground, climbing slopes, carrying meat or wood, cutting, scraping, striking, pulling, lifting, dragging. These activities warm the body while they are happening, but they also spend it. By night, the same movement that kept a person warm during the day may leave muscles tired, joints aching, and sleep heavier. Exhaustion is dangerous because it makes waking harder when the fire needs tending. So the group must balance motion and rest. Too much stillness in the day, and the body may chill. Too much effort, and the body enters night depleted. Too little food, and effort becomes a debt. Too little rest, and the next day weakens. Survival is not a simple command to be tougher. It is an ongoing adjustment between work, warmth, and recovery. Landscape knowledge becomes another adaptation, carried not in bone, but in memory. A person who knows where animals pass after frost saves energy. A person who knows which slope holds snow longer avoids difficult travel. A person who remembers where dead wood gathers after storms reduces the time spent searching for fuel. A person who knows the sheltered side of a ridge may guide the group toward a better stopping place. These forms of knowledge do not show in a skeleton, but they keep the skeleton alive. Memory warms the body by preventing waste. It helps the group avoid places that steal effort for little reward. It helps them choose routes where the wind is less punishing. It tells them when a shelter is worth returning to, when a river crossing is too costly, when a valley may hold animals, when a patch of trees may offer better fuel, when an exposed rise is not worth the view. The body survives not by strength alone, but by moving through the world intelligently enough to save strength for when it matters. Tools extend that intelligence into the hands of. A sharp stone edge means meat can be divided more efficiently. A scraper means hide can be worked into something more useful. A hammerstone means bones can be broken open for marrow. A prepared core or flake is not warmth by itself, but it unlocks warmth from animal bodies, from coverings, from food, from labour made easier. Tool-making is one of the quiet ways cold is answered before the night begins. Even the choice of what to carry is an adaptation. A mobile group cannot take everything. Heavy hides help, but they burden movement. Fuel is necessary, but carrying wood too far drains energy. Stone tools matter, but weight adds up. Meat feeds, but spoils or attracts attention if mishandled. The group must choose what is worth the cost. Warmth is never free in a mobile life. Every useful thing must justify the effort of moving it. This may be one of the greatest differences between ancient and modern comfort. Modern warmth lets us accumulate. We fill rooms with blankets, clothes, lamps, stored fuel, machines, and backup systems. Mobile Neanderthals lived with more severe choices. What can be carried? What can be made again? What can be found at the next place? What must be protected because replacing it would cost too much? A hide can be warmth, but also weight. A coal can be life, but also attention. A tool can be security, but also something that must not be lost. Food can be heat, but also a burden until eaten. Adaptation lives inside those choices. It also lives in timing. The group that waits too long to gather fuel suffers after dark. The group that moves too late may arrive tired at a poor shelter. The group that eats too early may be hungry before morning. The group that burns too brightly at dusk may lack heat before dawn. Timing is invisible when it works, but brutal when it fails. By now in the shelter, time has narrowed. The deepest part of night may be passing, or perhaps it is still ahead. The fire has been tended more than once. The fuel pile is smaller. The bodies have found and lost warmth in cycles. Hunger may be quiet in some, sharper in others. The stone wall remains cold. The hide edges have shifted many times. Everyone is still alive, but the night has taken payment in sleep, smoke, stiffness, and energy. This is where adaptation looks least heroic and most real. It is the person who knows not to waste the last dry piece of wood. It is the person who can wake from shallow sleep because the air has changed. It is the body that curls before thinking. It is the older memory of a better shelter beyond the next rise. It is the hand that can still grip a tool in morning because it was kept warm enough through the dark. It is the group that knows when to move closer, when to endure smoke, when to let the fire sink, and when to wake it again. Adaptation is not one feature. It is many layers working together. Bone shape, muscle, diet, tools, fire, shelter knowledge, social care, memory, timing, restraint. Each layer catches some of what the cold tries to take. None catches all of it. The frozen night tests the spaces between them. If the body is strong but food is poor, the system weakens. If food is good but shelter is exposed, the system weakens. If fire is present but fuel is damp, the system weakens. If all materials are ready but no one wakes, the system weakens. The group survives by keeping enough layers intact. Outside, the landscape holds the same cold that shaped these lives over generations. It shaped bodies slowly, through ancestry. It shaped habits quickly, through pain and memory. It shaped tools, roots, shelters, and expectations. It did not make Neanderthals invincible. It made them skilled because skill was demanded again and again. Inside, the sleeper's breath warms a small space beneath the hide. The ember remains under ash. A hand rests near the chest, fingers curled, preserving heat for morning work. The body is ancient, powerful, and vulnerable all at once. It has been shaped by cold, but it is still asking the fire, the hide, the group, and the memory of the landscape to help it last until dawn. The coldest hour is not always the loudest. It may come quietly, after the group has already endured most of the night. The fire has been fed and lowered. The better pieces of fuel are fewer now. The hides have been shifted so many times that their first arrangement is forgotten. Bodies have curled, turned, woken, settled, and woken again. The shelter has done its work imperfectly, and the people inside it have done theirs. Then the dark seems to deepen. This is the hour when the body feels the length of survival. Not the first shock of cold, not the first brave answer to it, but the slow wearing down. The stiffness in the hips from hard ground, the dry ache in the throat from smoke, the heaviness behind the eyes, the toes that have never fully warmed, the shoulder that keeps finding the same cold fold of air, the hunger that may have slept for a while, then returned as a hollow pull beneath the ribs. A person wakes and does not know at first why. There is no sharp sound, no animal at the entrance, no storm breaking over the shelter, only a feeling that the warmth has thinned. The body understands before thought does. The back is cold. The face is warmer. One hand is numb where it slipped from the chest. The ember is still present, but small, its red half hidden beneath ash. The air near the ground has grown colder, as if the night has pooled there. The person lies still for a few breaths. Stillness is the first test. Perhaps the warmth will return if the body curls tighter. Perhaps the hide can be pulled without rising. Perhaps the fire can wait. No one wants to break the pocket of heat that sleep has made, but the body keeps reporting the same answer. The coal is too low. The cold is entering faster than the cover can hold it. If no one moves, the whole shelter will pay. So the person moves slowly because speed wastes heat. One arm emerges into the air, skin tightens, fingers close around the stick left near the hearth. The person leans forward, and the hide falls from one shoulder. For a moment, the body is divided, face warmed by the faint coal, back touched by the dark, knees against the hard floor, hand hovering over ash. The stick opens a small channel through the grey surface. Red appears, not bright, but alive. That little red is the quiet climax of the night. Not a battle, not a shout, a coal. Everything depends on whether there is enough life left in it to wake the fire without wasting what remains. The person breathes carefully, perhaps shielding the movement of air with the body. A thin piece of fuel is drawn near, one that can catch without smothering the coal. Too large a piece might crush the heat. Too damp a piece might smoke and fail. Too little might burn out without helping. The choice is made in dimness, with cold fingers and a tired mind. The wood touches the ember. For a moment, nothing changes. The shelter waits. The person waits. The cold waits too, patient as stone. Then a narrow line of red travels into the wood, almost invisible at first. Smoke lifts in a thread. The person adjusts the angle. A faint glow widens. Not flame yet, only promise. The stick remains in hand, steadying the fuel so it does not roll away from the heat. Behind the person, someone shifts under a hide. Another sleeper makes a small sound and turns toward the hearth. A child's foot, cold at the edge of the covering, is pulled back by an adult hand without full waking. The group is responding to the fire before the fire has truly returned. Bodies know the meaning of that red line. They know that a little more heat may be coming. Then the flame appears. It is small, blue-orange at the base, yellow at the tip, unsteady as a waking animal. It licks the dry edge of the wood and bends when air moves through the shelter. It brightens a cheek, then a tool, then the cracked curve of a bone near the ash. The person tending it does not celebrate, they only watch. A flame can be too eager. A flame can spend itself quickly. It must be encouraged, not indulged. Another piece of fuel is not added yet. Restraint is survival now. The cold wants more fire, but morning may still be far enough away to punish waste. The person uses ash like a blanket and air like a tool, opens a little, covers a little, lets heat gather where it is needed. The fire becomes not a blaze, but a controlled pulse, enough to warm the nearest air. enough to revive the hearth, enough to keep the system alive. This hour reveals how thin the line can be. If the coal had died, the shelter would not instantly become death, but the cost would rise sharply. Starting again, if possible, would demand more effort. Finding or preparing new flame would take time, skill, and luck, depending on what the group had and what conditions allowed. The bodies would wait colder. Morning would begin with more difficulty. The day's first work would be burdened by the night's failure. But the coal has not died. It glows now under the growing edge of flame, and that glow gathers the group back from the edge of discomfort. The nearest sleeper stretches one hand toward it, then pulls the hand back under cover. Another breathes more deeply. The child stops shifting. The person who woke lowers the stick and stays seated a moment longer, letting heat return to the fingers. Their face is lit from below, briefly visible in the old shelter. A heavy brow, tired eyes, smoke-darkened hair, skin marked by weather, age, work, or all of them. We should not pretend to know this person's exact face, name, or thoughts, but we can understand the situation. A human body, cold and tired, performing a necessary act for others as much as for itself. The gesture is simple. The meaning is large. The fire warms the hand first. That is always how comfort announces itself at this hour, not as a whole room transformation, but as a local mercy. Fingertips, palm, wrist, a cheek, the front of one knee, the side of a face. The rest of the body remains cold, waiting its turn. Heat spreads unevenly, but even uneven heat changes the mind. The person's breathing slows. The decision has worked. The night has been repaired again. Outside, dawn has not arrived. The landscape beyond the shelter is still dark, perhaps touched by frost, perhaps covered in hard ground, perhaps holding the tracks of animals that moved while humans slept. The wind continues. The cold remains. Nothing outside has softened. The change is only here, inside this small human arrangement. The coal revived, the fuel saved from failure, the sleepers gathered again around a living centre. This is the closest the night comes to breaking the system, and the answer is not dramatic enough for a legend. A person woke. A coal remained. A stick moved. A branch caught. A group slept on. But that is the truth of many ancient survivals. They were not made of grand moments visible from far away. They were made of correct little actions performed at the edge of exhaustion. They were made of people who knew when to wake, when to wait, when to spend, when to save, when to share warmth, and when to endure discomfort without turning it into panic. The quiet climax passes almost as soon as it arrives. The flame steadies, then lowers. The coal bed is healthier now. The person does not stay upright longer than necessary. Sitting in the cold is another cost. They place the stick where it can be found again, draw the hide back over the shoulder, and lower themselves carefully to the ground. The first touch of the bedding is cold because the body has been away from it. Then, slowly, breath and skin begin to reclaim the space. The group returns to sleep, but the sleep is thinner now, closer to morning. The system has survived its hardest test of the night. Not perfectly. There is smoke in the throat, stiffness in the limbs, and less fuel than before. But the fire lives. The hides still cover. The shelter still blocks part of the wind. The bodies still breathe near one another. Enough remains. Under ash, the ember brightens and dims, like a slow red heartbeat in the dark. And around it, the Neanderthal group endures the last deep cold before dawn. Not by defeating winter, but by answering it, one small act at a time. After the coldest hour, the night does not end at once. It loosens slowly. The fire has been repaired, but it is no longer asked to do as much. Its flame is low again, not from neglect, but from caution. The last part of the night is a place for saving fuel, saving strength, saving the small red life under ash for morning. The shelter has already spent much of what it prepared. The woodpile is smaller, the sleepers are stiffer. The hides are warmer in some places, damp in others. The air tastes of smoke, but less sharply now. Somewhere beyond the shelter mouth, the darkness has changed its weight. No clear light has entered yet. No sun has touched stone. But the blackness is not as deep as it was. A person half awake may sense the difference before seeing it. The wind seems to have more shape. The opening of the shelter is no longer a single blank absence. It has edges, still faint, still cold. Dawn is not here, but it has begun to think about arriving. Inside, the group sleeps as people sleep after effort. Not peacefully, exactly, but with the heaviness of bodies that have made it through something. A child is pressed close to an adult's side. Someone's arm lies across a hide to keep its edge from lifting. Someone near the wall has turned away from the stone. Near the hearth, the person who woke in the coldest hour has settled again, but their sleep is shallow. The body does not fully trust comfort after it has had to rebuild it. This is the descent toward rest. Not because the night becomes easy, but because the worst strain begins to pass. The body, after hours of correction, enters a tired compromise. It accepts the ache in the hip. It accepts the smoke in the throat. It accepts that one foot never became fully warm. It accepts the weight of another body nearby. It accepts the hide smell, the rough ground, the uneven heat, the remaining cold. Sleep returns because the body cannot keep resisting everything. It chooses what can be endured. The hearth glows quietly, no longer a dramatic centre, but a working heart. Ash has gathered over it in soft grey folds. Beneath them, red shows through in small places, like light seen through cracks in earth. A thin piece of wood blackens slowly at the edge. There is enough heat to keep the centre alive, not enough to fill the shelter with brightness. That is all the group asks now. No one needs a feast of flame. They need continuity. Continuity is one of the oldest comforts. It is the feeling that what saved you a moment ago has not vanished. The hide is still there. The person beside you is still breathing. The shelter roof is still above. The ember is still red. The wind is still outside more than inside. The world has not become kind, but it has not taken away the few things holding the group together. The final hours of night teach a different skill from the earlier ones. Earlier, action mattered most. Gather, arrange, tend, shift, feed, cover, wake. Now restraint matters. Burning the remaining fuel too quickly would be a mistake. Rising too often would waste heat. Disturbing the sleepers without need would make morning harder. The right action may be almost nothing. A hand placed over a loose hide edge, a foot tucked back, a coal left covered, a breath taken slowly through cloth or skin-warmed air. Survival is sometimes attention without movement. A person near waking may listen to the fire and decide not to touch it. That decision has weight. It means the coal is still safe enough. It means fuel can be saved. It means the group can rest a little longer. Not every problem requires immediate correction. Some must simply be watched. An ancient night punishes panic as surely as neglect. The shelter's objects have become quieter too. The stone tools near the hearth no longer shine in flame. They wait in dimness. Their edges hidden until morning fingers find them again. The cracked bones are empty of marrow, but not empty of meaning. Their work has moved into the bodies sleeping nearby. The hides, so important all night, have become landscape themselves. Low folds, dark shapes, small ridges over shoulders and knees. The ash, once waste and cover and protection, is now the most important blanket in the shelter, lying over the coal as carefully as hide lies over skin. Everything is layered, ash over ember, hide over body body beside body, rock over shelter, darkness over land, memory over all of it. This is not a permanent victory. When morning comes, cold will not disappear. It will enter the hands as soon as work begins. It will stiffen the first steps outside. It will make tools feel hard in the palm. It will follow the group if they leave and wait for them if they stay. The day may bring movement, hunting, hunger, repair, gathering, decision. The next night may ask the same questions again. But the meaning of survival is not that the question ends. It is that the answer lasts long enough. The Neanderthal group does not need to conquer the whole season before dawn. It only needs this night to pass without the system breaking. It needs bodies warm enough to rise, hands useful enough to work, feet ready enough to move, fire alive enough to begin again. The scope is small because life is made of small scopes. This breath, this ember, this hour, this shelter, this child, this next morning. A faint greyness begins to gather at the entrance. The change is slight. The stone outside is not yet clear. The ground beyond the shelter remains hard and cold. But the edge of the world has returned. Darkness no longer presses as one unbroken surface. A person half opens their eyes and sees not daylight, but the possibility of it. That possibility is enough to lower the fear inside the body. The fire is allowed to rest lower. Soon, if the group decides to stay for part of the morning, it may be fed again. If they must move, the question will become what can be carried, what must be left, and whether an ember can be preserved or the fire must be remade elsewhere. The day will bring decisions of its own, but for these last minutes before dawn, the shelter is mostly still. Breath rises in small clouds when it escapes the warmth of hides. A shoulder shifts. A hand tightens, then relaxes. Someone swallows against a smoke-dry throat. The child who was tucked close sleeps more deeply now, held in the warmth others helped create. The person near the opening hears the wind and lets it remain outside. No alarm follows. No one rises. The old system, imperfect and smoky and labour-heavy, has carried them near morning, and this is where the night becomes almost tender, not because it was gentle, but because its hard work is nearly done. The bodies that shared heat are still together. The ash still hides fire. The shelter still holds its rough shape around them. In the dimness before dawn, every object seems humbled by use. Nothing is clean, nothing is easy, nothing is abundant, but enough remains. The coal breathes under ash, not brightly, not proudly, just enough. And around it, the group drifts through the last thin layer of sleep, while the frozen world outside waits for the first movement of the day. Morning arrives without warmth. It arrives as a paling at the shelter mouth, a thin grey edge on stone, a change in the colour of the air. The cold is still there. It has not retreated because the darkness is lifting. It lies on the ground, clings to the hides, waits in the joints, sits inside the first breath taken away from the hearth. Dawn is only light at first, not mercy. The group wakes slowly. No one rises as if from a soft bed. Bodies unfold with caution. A knee straightens and aches. A hand comes out from under a hide and closes quickly against the air. A shoulder rolls away from stone. Someone coughs once, the sound dry from smoke and sleep. The child tucked close through the night stirs against the adult who shared warmth. Near the hearth, the ash is grey on top, but beneath it the coal still lives. That is the first victory of the morning. Not comfort, not abundance. A coal. The person nearest it leans forward, still heavy with sleep, and opens the ash carefully. Red shows through. Small, but real. The night has not taken everything. The fire can be woken without beginning from nothing. A few dry splinters, if they have been saved, can be placed near the glow. A breath, a shielded hand, a cautious movement of fuel. The ember answers slowly, then more strongly. Smoke rises, thin at first, then thicker as the new piece catches. The shelter begins again. This is what the frozen night has really been protecting. The possibility of beginning again. The fire that warmed bodies also preserves morning. The hides that held sleep can be shaken, moved, dried, wrapped, folded, or carried. The tools that waited near the hearth can return to hands. The cracked bones, emptied of marrow, remain as proof that yesterday fed the night. The bodies, though stiff and tired, are still able to move. Survival is not a triumphant ending. It is continuity. A modern mind often wants a final answer. How did they stay warm? The answer, after a whole night beside them, is not one secret. They stayed warm by losing heat slowly enough, by keeping fire alive, by choosing shelter well enough, by using hides well enough, by eating when food could be found, by sleeping close, by tending coals, by accepting smoke, by knowing materials, by protecting the vulnerable, by waking at the right moments, by not wasting fuel, by letting ash cover flame, and letting bodies cover one another. They stayed warm by never expecting warmth to be free. That may be the deepest difference between their night and ours. We often meet warmth as a background condition, something already prepared before we notice it. Walls hold it. Machines produce it. Wires and pipes carry it. Fuels are gathered far away by people we never see. A room becomes warm, and the labour disappears. In the Neanderthal shelter, nothing disappears. Every comfort has a visible source. A hide came from an animal and a hand. A coal came from fuel and attention. A meal came from risk. A dry place came from memory. A warm child came from another body's nearness. Comfort is exposed as labour, and yet the scene should not be reduced to hardship alone. There is skill here. There is intelligence. There is social life. There is a kind of quiet care in the way warmth is moved from fire to skin, from food to body, from adult to child, from yesterday's work to this morning's survival. The group has not defeated the Ice Age. It has lived one more night inside it. The first full light reaches the shelter floor. It shows what darkness hid. The ash spread around the hearth. The blackened stone above. The hard ground marked by sleeping bodies. The hide edges stiff from use. The tools near the fire. The scattered bone. The smoke that still drifts upward, searching for the roof before it finds the opening. Nothing looks clean. Nothing looks easy. But everything has had a job. The stone held off part of the weather. The fire kept a centre. The hides slowed the loss. The food fed the inner heat. The group carried the work no single body could carry alone. One person rises first, perhaps because their place is nearest the opening, perhaps because habit pulls them into the day. They step out of the warmer circle and the cold takes hold immediately. Morning air enters the lungs sharper than the air inside the shelter. The ground beyond the hearth is hard underfoot. The world outside is pale, wide, and unfinished. If frost lies there, it catches the light. If snow lies there, it holds the footprints of the night's passing animals. If only frozen earth lies there, it still waits with the same indifference. The day will ask its own questions. Where is fuel now? Is the weather turning? Must the group move? Is there food enough? Are the hides dry enough to carry or use again? Is the ember worth preserving? Which direction offers shelter for the next night? Which body is stiff? Which one is hungry? Which one needs help? The answers will be made in motion, just as the night's answers were made in stillness. Behind the waking person, the fire grows a little. Not large, just enough to warm hands, to bring the coal fully back, to make the shelter's centre visible. Someone else sits up. A hide falls from a shoulder. A child blinks into the dim morning. Another person reaches toward the heat, palm open, fingers spread, receiving what the night has saved. For a moment, the gesture is simple enough to cross the distance between their world and ours. A hand near a fire, a body grateful for warmth, a morning that was not guaranteed. This is where the old picture of Neanderthals as crude creatures falls apart most quietly. Not in a grand speech about intelligence, but in the arrangement of the shelter itself. Fire held through darkness, tools ready for work, hides kept useful, bodies placed with care, fuel judged and saved, cold answered without fantasy. The scene is not primitive in the careless sense, it is precise, because imprecision costs heat, and still, it remains humble. No one in the shelter knows they will be studied one day through fragments. No one knows that distant people will wonder how they survived frozen nights. No one knows that their smoke-darkened hearth, their broken bones, their worked stones, and their vanished hides will become pieces of a question. They are not symbols to themselves. They are simply alive in the morning, which is enough. The ember under ash has done its work. It carried fire through the lowest hour. It waited while bodies slept badly. It gave the group a way to begin again without spending the first strength of morning fighting cold from emptiness. Soon it may become flame. Later it may become ash again. Perhaps another coal will be saved for another night. Perhaps the group will leave this shelter and the hearth will cool completely, waiting in silence until time covers it. But for now, the coal is red, the smoke rises, the shelter breathes. The frozen night has passed, not because it became gentle, but because the group knew how to make it less deadly by degrees. They did not need perfect warmth. They needed enough warmth, protected by enough labour, shared by enough bodies, remembered through enough nights, to keep life moving from one darkness into the next day. And as the first true light touches the cold stone, the final image is small, a hand drawing ash back over a living coal. Not to end the fire, but to keep it. The flame lowers. The red remains hidden. Outside, the morning waits. Inside, warmth is still borrowed, still fragile, still human.